the initial part of the war hasn't worked out and Iran's gotten stronger. From President Trump's perspective, he's in what I call an escalation trap. Are we going to basically pull back and let Iran rise? Or are we going to get even tougher? I'm not saying that Russia and China want to end this war. What they're pursuing, Harry, is in my field called a bait and bleed strategy.
Right.
Sucker America into a quagmire.
Now, with two regional conflicts battling on through this year, are they about to merge? With Ukraine striking an Iranian ship, are things getting heated? Are we on the precipice, as one professor says, perhaps, of World War III? Professor Robert Pape is joining us now on Harry Cole Saves the West. Professor, should we be getting to the bomb shelters just yet?
No, I wrote a piece on my Substack. It's called the Professor Pape Substack this morning because I've been asked about this, and so many people are talking about this because you'll remember it was only a week ago that Ukraine attacked an Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea. And this was the first real scare that maybe these two wars, the Ukraine war and also the Iran war, were going to become linked. And we'd had some worry about this for some time, Harry. So this is not the very first shot across the bow, because, of course, we've had Russian intelligence that's been provided to Iran. We have a lot of indications, I would say, of Chinese support for Iran, including possibly some military equipment, 400 man portable air defense systems coming in sometime soon. So I thought it was really important that we take a look at this, because this issue of how does a local war expand, Harry, this isn't just hyperbole. This isn't just like food for the journalists at the moment, clickbait. This has been something that historians, strategists like me have been arguing about for decades and decades. And there's a lot of ideas floating around, and I'm glad to talk about those. But a lot of those ideas, Harry, that float around give the impression that it just magically happens. World War I magically happened. World War II magically happened. There was no thought to anything. And there's some truth to those arguments. I don't want to say not. But what I wanted to write about was the fact of the matter is, if you look at, say, World War II in detail, and you look at the wars, that they expand globally outside of the region when it is in the actor's strategic interest to do that. Now, they don't always make the right calculation. I want to be clear. It's not as if they're always calling it right. But at the end of the day, what you see in, say, Operation Torch, which in World War II was when the Allies are coming into Northern Africa, or you see the Battle of the Atlantic in 1943, which is expanding World War II. What you see are decisions by the states at the time that the best way to hurt their enemy is to expand. And they're having to make trade-offs. Because if they use force to do A, they can't use B. You can't use it twice.
Well, on that point, exactly.
And that is the key limit here that I was trying to get across in the piece today.
I think that's exactly the point, though, because Ukraine very quickly, having struck this Iranian vessel, very quickly rowed back. It very quickly decided, perhaps, after threats from Iran, that they would. We know they've already been supplying drones to the Russians in return, perhaps, for nuclear secrets. That's certainly one theory that's been doing the rounds. But it very quickly became clear that the Ukrainians may have slightly overcooked things. Do you think that was them realizing that they didn't want to, they had perhaps bitten off more than they can chew, and it wasn't in their interests to expand this war? Or do you think it's the Americans and the West saying, whoa, what the hell are you doing?
I think, Harry, what may well have happened is, notice that happened shortly after the NATO summit when Zelensky had met with Trump, and then Zelensky met with Trump again. So that one of the things that I think Zelensky may have thought he was doing there was just literally trying to send a message to Trump, hey, I'm on your side, President Trump. Be nice to us in Ukraine. So more of a signal here than it was an actual commitment to really get deeply involved in the Iran war. And I think that, and then what I tried to do explain in the piece is, so if you thought of this from either Ukraine's perspective of getting deeper into the Iran war or Russia's perspective, you quickly get to the point where do you really want, if you're Ukraine, do you really want to use some of your scarce assets here that you're already begging America to help you with? Do you want to start to really get even deeper into that scarcity by widening into? I don't think so with you. And what about Russia? Is Russia really wanting to? It's already have Russia and Ukraine war. It's already a massive problem. Does Russia really want to open another front where they're going to commit troops of
Yeah.
actual units to help defend Iran? That's probably not coming. So what I was trying to show was that yes, there's going to be connections. Yes, of course, the two wars are linked economically in the world. So both of them are having massive global economic consequences that together make the world economy in more dire straits. But the thing that I think people are saying is, are we really heading to World War III? I was trying to say the odds of this are pretty low. And at each level, I kind of laid out a ladder of escalation. At each level, I was saying that odds of going up that was lower, was lower. It was the opposite of the standard idea, which is we get on a slippery slope, we just kind of lose our minds, and we just escalate to in a World War II style. I was trying to pour some cold water on that, Harry, because I really thought it was important that somebody lay out some scenarios here, lay out some meaty discussion, because so far what I had been seeing, and even when people were talking to me, was I think the opposite of what I'm seeing people want online. What I'm experiencing, Harry, is an enormous demand for substance. And that's why it took me 3 days to write that piece. It was not that piece was not knocked out in like 2 hours like an op-ed or something. Okay, so if you read that piece, you'll see there's a lot of thought that went into that and a lot of substance and history. And what I was trying to do was I was trying to answer the demand that I see on my Substacks and I see all around here online, which is people say, okay, let's actually give this some serious discussion.
Well, isn't it? Fact is that the law of the jungle still very much abides on the geopolitical stage, and until it's in the interests of both America and China for this to escalate, then nothing happened. We know that China have held back Russia in Ukraine in the past. They have been arming them in some ways, supplying ammunition, but they've also been a kind of hand on the tiller, I suppose, or pulling them off the throttle, if to mix my metaphors. On the American side, it's been a war of incrementation. Joe Biden was very keen not, it was a big old battles about arming them with tanks and then arming them with long-range missiles and then being allowed to use those missiles in Russia, all because of that fear, fear of escalation. At the moment, it doesn't seem the Chinese want to get involved.
Yeah, so before we leave this topic, Harry, let me make a distinction that I think maybe folks will find helpful. So when we talk about escalation, we could be talking about, as I was today, about a widening of the war outside of the region here, or we could be talking about the actors in the conflict already paying more cost. I think that China and I think Russia are perfectly happy having America in a quagmire where Americans are paying more and more cost.
Yeah.
So when I say that I don't think we're in World War III, I'm not saying that Russia and China want to end this war. I'm not saying they want peace. I think what they're pursuing, Harry, is in my field called a bait and bleed strategy.
Right.
Sucker America into a quagmire, get it in deeper and deeper, you see what I mean, so that it's pinned down and paid costs. And from Xi's perspective in China, boy, does that bring a lot of benefits because now you've got a situation where those interceptors that we're burning up and burning through in the Persian Gulf, each one we burn up there can't use in the Taiwan scenario. all the quagmire, all the loss of confidence in America in Iran, that's paying dividends for Xi in Asia across the board. So what you have is I'm saying I do believe that Russia and China have a real interest actually in getting us stuck in a costly quagmire. And this is why they're not all that eager to just bail us out. It's because this serves their strategic interests. But I don't think that means then they're going to want to have direct military involvement or that next level where it will really look like a great power war a la World War II. That's really what I was trying to
Yeah.
separate out.
Is there circumstances you can see in which that does happen? I mean, it strikes me that the Chinese are just kind of waiting for the Trump presidency to filter out naturally. I mean, he's only going to be here for another 3 years, and they certainly
Well,
plan and predict in longer
put a
than that.
number on it. I'd say it's somewhere around 10 or 20% possibility. I don't say it's nothing.
That's
Here, I
that's
don't say
that's
it's
pretty. That's a
zero.
pretty big. That's, if you're a gambling man, you'd have a look at those odds, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's not nothing here. And the real issue here, I think, is because Iran as an ally is highly valuable
Mm.
for Russia and China. So we're talking right now, are we going to basically pull back and let Iran rise, or are we going to get even tougher with Iran? Well, if we were to actually come out with a knockout blow on Iran, which I think is going to be hard to do, that I think would be something Russia and China might have something to say about for real. Because right now, there's a tremendous benefit. Let me just pick China. And I hope this is not a little bit too much inside
Not at
baseball,
all.
but
No, no.
one of the
We
big
are
things
very
that
much Beltway here.
Okay, so one of the things that China has been benefiting from in the last 20 years is the decline of the dollar as the world's reserve currency
Mm.
and the rise of BRICS. It's a set of countries that want to increasingly have international trade flows denominated in anything but dollars. And you see that with Iran, Iran is completely on board with this. And they are, when oil is transiting through Hormuz now, they're not just demanding fees and control in the future. They want to have the sales denominated in yuan, not dollars. So this is something that when we talk about the control of Hormuz, when we unpack it, it doesn't just simply mean fees. They're really interested in controlling how the currency, the trade is denominated. And you might say, well, who cares? Because couldn't you swap out a dollar for a yuan? No, it makes a big difference here in terms of the finances of the world. So it makes a lot of difference here in terms of our demand for dollars, which lowers our costs of our borrowing. We have this huge $40 trillion debt.
Mm.
Well, the more that we have, the more that there's less petrodollars, less money going to the dollar, more to the Chinese currency, the more the interest rates go up. That is, the more the inflation goes up in the United States. So there's a lot of complexity there. I hope that's okay. But the bottom line is this is a real when we talk about Iran as an ally, it's not just because it's sitting there geographically on a map like a game of risk. There's some actual tangible benefits here for China's growth as the next #1 country in the world. I'm not in favor of that, by the way, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying we're this war is accelerating China as the next number
Well,
one,
I was just going
not
to say,
slowing it down.
on the flip side of the fact that World War III, might not be with bombs and bullets or drones or in cyberspace, economic world war is well and truly underway. We're into years of that.
Absolutely underway. And that is what could end up being the real soft underbelly of America here. And in fact, with Scott Besson, just in the last 72 hours, you're starting to see some signs of this. Again, this is all very much very technical because it has to do with bonds and so forth. But if you look at the Japanese, The reason Scott Bessent looks like he hasn't slept in 3 days is because of Japan. And
Mm.
one of the things that's happening is, given the Iran war, this is creating certain financial pressures on the yen. It's again technical, complicated, but the bottom line is
They own a hell of a
Japan
lot of
was
debt.
threatening to sell its treasury bills to pay the bills. It's got to get some money, and where is it going to get that money from? It has T-bills in the bank. Just like if you or I needed some money and we got a cat, a bunch of T-bills, we might have to sell some of our T-bills. Same with a country like Japan. Well, this is a very serious issue because our 10-year bonds are already shooting up, our 30-year bonds are shooting up, and we got to pay the interest on that. And this is an enormous problem for us as a country, Harry. And this is why the Iran war, it's not just the interceptor, it's not just the battlefield the way we're used to thinking about wars. This has become an economic battlefield, and that too is working to Iran's advantage. It's working to Russia's advantage. It's working to China's advantage, and it's working to Pakistan's advantage. This is the war that is it's just much bigger than the previous wars. This war, Iran is the biggest challenge we faced since Germany in World War II.
And yet it does feel like the coverage and it's almost the president's getting bored of this war that he's started. The American public, beyond moaning about $5 gas, I mean, and justifiably moaning at that, it doesn't feel like this war is getting the sort of justification it deserves if the stark circumstances of it you lay out are anything to go by.
Well, President Trump has done a really a masterful job. I mean, he should give a master class in public rhetoric to influence markets. I mean, he makes a lot of money in other ways. So I'm just saying this will go down in history as the most stunning example of the bully pulpit in the United States, the president's use of the airwaves, and also social media in order to keep markets from panicking. So, and that is enormous because see, a lot of what happens in economic markets is literally panic because so much is traded on speculation. So if you look at, how much oil is traded in a month compared to how much speculation is happening on the oil in a month, it's like 50 to 1. So if you can keep tamped down the panic part of the market, then you can actually keep prices down, including gas prices, for some time. Now, eventually, you run out of molecules. Eventually, you're not going to be able to keep it down forever because we don't put President Trump's true social posts in our cars. We put gas in our cars, and that comes from actual crude oil. So at the end of the day, though, that we should see that President Trump really has done something that's really quite that's going to go down as one of the things that people will study, which is I don't think before if you would ask anybody before this war, could the President of the United States keep the price of oil
Below
here under
$100.
$80 a barrel for 5 months, given you shut off essentially Hormuz for 5 months. I don't think you get a single smart person, economist, whatever, signing up to that. I don't think so. And I've talked to quite a few of them. So I think this is really quite a stunning thing. But I think we should also recognize that's probably starting to get to the flat of the curve because we really are getting to the point where you're having the problem in, say, Japan, for example. That's not a problem you can paper over
Yeah, and
with political talk.
those Chinese oil reserves that no one seemed to know about presumably won't last forever in terms of
No, and
being
China
released.
doesn't necessarily want to keep bailing us out. They helped us
Mm.
when we were doing the
Why
MOU.
do you think
So
they did that?
essentially, what happened, Harry, is President Trump went and had a meeting with Xi, and there seems to have been a quid pro quo that came out. We still don't know this, and President Trump has kept it pretty close to the vest. But after that meeting with President Xi in China, China's oil purchases went down, and that helped us in America.
Mm.
Well, now once the MOU disappeared, China's back to buying more oil, you see. So something happened there, Harry, that we still don't know the full details on yet. And it looks to me like there was a quid pro quo, and part of it may have been doing an MOU. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that, and we'll see. Maybe there'll be another round of this.
And
I
why
don't know.
we've been through another round of, in the last couple of weeks, of, bellicose rhetoric from the White House on Truth Social, on the airwaves, fresh threats to, pummel Iran back into the Stone Ages, left, right, and centre, coming out of the president's mouth. Yeah, once again, he takes everyone to the brink, and then, is it taco? Is it a lack of weapons? Is it some sort of game of 4D chess that we mere mortals are not privy to? What do you think is going on behind these?
Well,
these bluffs?
I don't think it's the end of the war. So I wish it was the end of the war. I don't think it's de-escalation. What I think you fundamentally have here as a problem, Harry, is that the war changed the balance of power in the Persian Gulf and the Middle East. And what I mean by that is, before the war, February 27, America was clearly the dominant power in the region. No, everybody was afraid of America before the war. And Israel was the rising power, and Iran was actually the declining power. What's happened in the war is all of those lines have reversed. America has been knocked down a few pegs. Israel now is probably contained. It's having a hard time continuing to expand, in part because America is telling it to cool it. But also, Iran is now the rising power, controls Hormuz. It's now talked to the Houthis, one of its proxies, into spinning up trouble here with Saudi Arabia. So it's opened a second front here. And of course, it has another front it can open with Hezbollah in Lebanon. So you have a situation where Iran is now the rising power. So Iran, of course, wants to do a deal because it wants to just have that solidified that it's the new top dog in the region. But this is where President Trump's having the hardest problem, because if Trump were to agree to just the status quo, where Iran controls Hormuz and controls the oil flow and also the fees, and then I'm explaining the currency Iran becomes essentially the new hegemon in the Persian Gulf. And then it can also move to nuclear weapons. So, of course, President Trump doesn't want them to have nuclear weapons.
Exactly what the basis of this conflict was designed to stop.
Exactly. So from President Trump's perspective, he's in what I call an escalation trap, because the initial part of the war hasn't worked out and Iran's gotten stronger. That's stage 1 and 2 of the escalation trap. And now he's in a dilemma. Does he escalate more, or does he pull back and let Iran become the ascendant power in the region? Because Iran isn't suing for peace. Notice Iran's behavior in the last 2 months. It is not wanted, it's not been pursuing peace, it's been pursuing power. Iran has moved from goals of survival to ambition. And that's what you're seeing. Iran wants power.
Then it's hard
to. That is a different animal than we're used to thinking about.
It's hard to conclude that it's anything than a spectacular failure then on behalf of the Americans.
Yes, it's been a spectacular failure up until now. And if President Trump were to sign on the dotted line and stick to it with solidifying that failure, his legacy would be in tatters forever. Forever.
Well, certainly a bind he's bounded himself in, escalation on one side.
Well, that's why you see him bouncing and
other.
Oscillating back and forth, Harry. So what you see is he's on the horns of what I call the third stage dilemma. And there's not a good safe harbor here. So he keeps going back and forth, back and forth. I think there's a good chance there's more escalation by the United States coming. I think that even though he's got doesn't have great military options, they all have problems. So too does essentially surrender have problems. And so he's, I think, going to keep oscillating, I suspect, through January. I think this is going to go on. I've been saying this would go on for longer than most people think. I think now it's through January. And once we're in January, maybe both sides, President Trump, Iran, will start to look at what can they accomplish by the end of 2028. Then I think you'll be in a position. So this war is not, I don't think, gonna be over in any meaningful sense for quite some time.
So much for a 4 to 6 week conflict. Then it's a
Or a 4 day. I think he went into it, Harry, and I've been following this like minute by minute since the first bombs fell. I think President Trump thought literally this would be over by the Monday after he dropped those bombs.
Oh dear.
And he talked about how it would just be over, golden off ramps and all this. And I think this was just simply the most wicked set of mistakes, the escalation trap, the most wicked escalation trap that we have had in America's history. And right now, this is a spectacular defeat if this were to stand, because it's not even just losing the war, Harry. It's what this represents for America's preeminence in the world. Who wants American bases right now?
Well, yeah, certainly putting a big old target on our Gulf allies.
Even Britain is trying to say, hey, Iran, we're not involved.
Well, the Brits are trying to sell the Chagos Islands, but that is a different debate, and I'm sure one we could discuss another time. Professor Robert Pape, fascinating. If the world doesn't end with a bang, it will end with the bond markets. Fascinating insight to how this could escalate. Yeah, no, you can have that one. You can have that one for free.
You're brilliant, Harry.
How do we find your Substack? Tell our viewers.
The Escalation Trap is the main Substack, the Escalation Trap. I started it 3 days before the war. It's built on 20 years of modeling the bombing of Iran, taught for the U.S. Air Force, advised every White House from 2001 to 24, and those frameworks I'm bringing to the public.
Fascinating stuff. Check it out. Robert Pape there. Don't forget to subscribe. Plenty more to come from Harry Cole Saves the West. See you next time.